Very good morning. Welcome to this Cyber Live of Proximus Next Cybersecurity. This is the second Cyber Live in a series we started to bring regular cybersecurity topics to you in short webinars. This Cyber Live today, we are discussing in depth the conclusions of our yearly cybersecurity survey, a survey of which we launched the results a bit before summer. Welcome again, and I'll be your host for today for the next half hour. My name is Wouter van den Busse, and over the past years, I've been leading the cybersecurity solution and services development in Proximus Next. We are constantly investigating the fast-paced cybersecurity market. On one hand, we are in close contact with key technology providers, analysts, and policymakers in the market to really understand the evolving solution and requirement space. But on the other hand, we are gathering feedback from our customers through different methods. The perspective on not only our own services, but also on the overall requirements of yourselves, of organizations in our local market is key in evolving our offering. And we have decided to open up part of this research to the cybersecurity space. The survey report that we are presenting today is freely available on our website, both in a concise dynamic web page and a more extensive document. During today's brief, we'll be running through the main conclusions of the report and provide you with a bit of context on some of the results. The title of this year's report we've chosen In the Crosshairs, and it's very much tied to our brand campaign on holistic tech. As Proximus Next, we bring technology and expertise together to support business objectives of our customers. And the swarm of the little birds, the sparrows that you see on the pictures, visually represent the collaborative nature of the environment we operate in. Let's get started. The conclusions of the report are going to be presented in 5 chapters. We'll be looking at cyber incidents, how often they occur, the types of these incidents. In the second chapter, we look at the impact these incidents had on organizations in Benelux. Thirdly, we look at the maturity and strategy companies employ on cybersecurity. Look specifically at NIS2 compliancy, and in the last chapter, we look a bit ahead at what the future might bring. At the end of the presentation, we'll have some time for a question and answer session. Feel free to use the Q&A option in the Teams provided. The question will be curated, and at the end, I'll try to answer the questions you have. Before presenting the actual results, I'll give you some context on how we conducted the research. In the beginning of this year, in 2025, we surveyed close to 200 decision makers, and 193 to be more precise. These stakeholders are diverse in nature, different functions and different organizations they represent. About a third of the respondents are present in what we call the enterprise segment, above 250 employees typically. And 2/3 of the participants came from the SME segment, small and medium enterprises. The results of the survey are quite different depending on the segment, and on some points I will highlight the differences between the segments. From a geographic point of view, 9 out of 10 of the organizations operate mainly from Belgium, while 10% of the respondents operate from Luxembourg. So we really collaborated with our Luxembourg colleagues here. And I want to highlight this is already the 6th edition of the study. And this gives a bit of opportunity on some data points to look at the evolution over time. And I'll try to highlight some of the key evolution points during the presentation. In this first chapter, we'll be looking at the incidents themselves, the frequency, the type, and the detection of these incidents. One of the main conclusions is that 1 in 4 companies or organizations experienced a cybersecurity incident in the past year. Large organizations, in particular, report incidents more frequently than smaller ones. About 40% of the larger companies report an incident, while only 20% of the SME segment reported one. Over the past years, we've seen a steady decline in the portion of organizations that have reported incidents themselves, from about 1 in 3 in 2021 to about 1 in 4 now. This by itself is pretty surprising, as the perception is that cyber incidents are more present than ever. We think that this is kind of due to some And so to increased awareness and some habituation effect, where indeed organizations are getting more used to seeing cyber incidents and have maybe less tendency to report minor incidents. If we even split this data up in a finer segmentation, we clearly see the larger an organization becomes, the more they experience cyber incidents. From the very small independent companies to large enterprises, we see a huge difference. This really shouldn't come as a surprise, as larger organizations typically have a larger attack surface. They have more connected assets, they have more digital workers, and they have a larger online presence. While it is interesting to look at organizations that report incidents, it is also appealing to ask questions to those that claim not to have had one. And 5 in 6 of those organizations that did not report incidents are certain or very certain that they actually did not have one. And so that's good news. Most incidents occurring in non-essential organizations are also typically for the purpose of monetary gains. And we see most of the attacks, purpose of those attacks is to get some financial benefit from the attacker. And they do this either through money extortion or ransom, or threatening data leakage or block operations. And these are very visible, obviously. And this, I think this also contributes to the fact that enterprises, companies, think they noticed the incidents. Companies that report not having experienced these incidents also show a high level of confidence in their ability to detect it, what you can see on the right-hand side, where we see a high certainty that they have confidence in their detection capabilities. To conclude this first chapter on incidents, we present a bit of data on the type of incidents the participants reported. And it clearly jumps out that social engineering is by far the most reported category of incidents. Attacking organizations via their employees is the most common attack vector reported. And this also corresponds to our findings in the field. If we engage our cybersecurity incident response team in case of cyber urgencies, more often than not, the origin or the original compromise started with a social engineering attack, either through phishing, credential theft, or more advanced persuasion. An initial foothold is created, and after which further reconnaissance and escalation attempts to breach other assets. In this second chapter, we'll be looking at the impact incidents had on our respondents. First point of view of this impact, we could look at the asset type that was impacted. Over half of the respondents that had incidents reported that those incidents impacted their end user workstations, again, corresponding to the most common entry point of attacks, being the end user. And this is followed by the more traditional network and server infrastructure, where about 1 in 3 of the impacted organizations report impact on those assets. Although threats are rising on machines, on production environments, and on equipment in general, currently only few of the respondents claim impact on those assets over 2024. If we look at the impact from a data point of view, we clearly see that data which causes most immediate pain is impacted the most. We see that operational data responsible for running organizations, is the data that's being targeted. Having this data made unavailable or compromised severely hampers organizations. And we see that over time, the data that threatens continuity of operations is more often targeted and reported. The impact that companies had on this data jumped from 20% to 33% in the past year. Clearly, attackers know where it hurts and try to get to that data. Looking at impact from a financial point of view, we questioned our respondents on which explicit costs are more significant. And over half noted that the actual dealing with the incident in terms of resolution, in terms of reporting, impacted them the most. There was also an impact on productivity, with 1 in 3 reporting productivity loss and even 1 in 4 reporting reputational damage. It's also worth mentioning that 1 in 4 did not incur any additional costs due to the incident. Let's zoom a bit in on that productivity aspect. We've seen quite a range of responses here in terms of impact on productivity, which is expected. And depending on the size of the operational impact incident has, a larger portion of your staff might experience loss of productivity. And here in this data, we explicitly asked to the most significant incident that took place. Immediately worth noting is that 4 in 10 respondents experienced work interruptions as a result of a cyber incident, where generally less than 25% of the workforce is impacted. But you can also see that 1 in 6 of the organization has an incident that impacted more than half of their employees. And the impact is typically less than a week on productivity loss. If you look at the impact on the technical assets and the recoverability after an incident, we see that many organizations get their technical capabilities back up in less than a week. And some of them indeed had the major incidents covered in less than 1 day. But 1/3 of the organizations needed a few days, or even 4% needed more than a month to fully recover from the incident. Voila, that covered the impacts incident had and the incidents themselves. Let's now, in the next 2 chapters, zoom out a bit and try to look at the maturity organizations have or claim to have in cybersecurity and the cybersecurity strategies they apply in dealing with cyber incidents. First point of view on this is the setup that companies have put in place to detect and react on cyber incidents. We see 3 main models arising, roughly equally frequent. About a third uses their internal staff only to handle incidents. About a third has almost fully outsourced their responsibilities to an external managed security service provider or IT partner, while another third is using a hybrid mode of operations on which they rely both on their internal staff and an external service provider to handle incidents. If you look at this internal staff, there is clearly a shortage. In the Agoria report on cybersecurity sector in 2022, this gap of shortage was estimated at about 4,000 experts in Belgium. And also in our findings in this study and over the past years, we see that there is a structural gap in availability of resources. And we see that 40% of the organizations report to struggle with filling these gaps. And it's even more pronounced in larger enterprises, with over half of them claiming structural shortages in the cybersecurity teams. Enterprises, companies use different methods to close this gap. Large portion is looking more at putting this risk at a third party, this hiring risk, through outsourcing more than they did before. But obviously, internal recruitment, freelancing, and reskilling of internal staff are other strategies applied. And it's also a bit striking that even though many acknowledge the problem, but 1 in 10 do not have a strategy in place for recruitment in this domain. Since last year, we also started questioning organizations on their self-perceived maturity on certain points. We questioned whether they have a strategy in place on the different functions of the NIST cybersecurity framework. This framework looks at the different complementary functions organizations require to deal with cyber threats, ranging from proactively estimating weaknesses to reactively responding to incidents. Overall, we see that organizations rate themselves most advanced in the prevent and the detect capabilities, preventing cyber threats and detecting when something happens. These two domains have received most attention over the past years from the cyber industry as well. Plans to respond to incidents and recover from incidents are present in about 3 in 5 organizations, while a more proactive approach to cyber threat exposures seem to be lacking in many organizations, especially in the SMB segment. And we see that this proactive approach to cyber threat exposures is gaining ground. And you should really think a bit about threat exposures in a very broad sense. It's not just about vulnerabilities, about potential malicious code, but it's also about your supply chain. It's about potential data that has leaked in the past and is now available on dark web, passwords and others. Proactively looking at your footprint and mitigating the risks before they occur. This is one of the more complex data graphs I'm going to show during the presentation, but let's walk through it together. And we are showing in this graph the perceived maturity of organizations to deal with incidents. On the left, we see this view for larger companies. On the right, we see this for the SME segment. We question their confidence on the different steps in dealing with incidents. And a couple of points I want to highlight from this graph. Maybe first of all, the different steps, as you can see, the containment of incidents, the eradication of incidents, the recovery after incident, the lessons learned, and then as a fifth point, the communication strategy, both internal and external. And if we combine here the pink and the teal colors, which show that they have implemented this strategy and have confidence in it, we see clearly that large enterprises are more confident in their implemented strategies on all of the steps. That's for me one point. Second point is that the communication, both internal and external, has the lowest confidence. And that's also not an easy one to be fully prepared in, but it's good to exercise these communications beforehand. And a recovery, which is the middle, the third element in the list here, received overall the highest confidence score. This is a bit striking as we encounter many organizations in crisis throughout the year, and often a well thought out recovery strategy and a tested recovery strategy is certainly not always in place. So be careful not to be overconfident in this domain. Let's make a small extension from this maturity view into the NIS2 compliancy organizations might need to look for. Bit of a recap, and in Belgium, NIS2 became effective in October last year, and it already had immediate obligations when it comes to incident reporting in terms of notification of applicability. And organizations are now required to put measures in place to become more mature, and that depends on the classification, a basic, important, essential classification as an organization. And most of the weight of this regulation of NIS2 will come effect in the coming year and a half, with the deadlines in April this year and April next year, on which organizations will have to show that they have actually implemented measures through either self-declaration or even external certification. We asked 2 questions to our respondents on NIS2. One was on the applicability of NIS2 for their organization, and the second one was on readiness. And on the applicability, we basically asked whether they are considered an important or essential entity, and the NIS2 regulation applies to them. And it was striking to see the differences between larger and smaller organizations on two fronts. Obviously, larger organizations are more likely to be required to be compliant. And that is quite clear on the left that there's a lot more yes on the graph than for SMEs. But what's for me more striking is that in the SME segment, about 60% either they do not know that they have to comply or are not sure. While in the larger enterprise segment, 90%, 90, knows whether they have to comply or not. So this is really striking, that 60% of respondents are unsure of their compliancy in the SME segment. The second question on NIS2 that we asked is whether they feel ready for NIS2. And about less than 1 in 6 said, yes, we are compliant. We know what we have to do, and we already did it. This is what, for reference, this was a view in the first quarter of 2025. And we see that many are working to become more compliant, with indeed over half having said that more than 50% of the compliancy requirements are met. In our final chapter, we look forward at how our respondents perceive the future. First of all, the fear is real. The increase in political attention and media coverage cyberspace received in the past years, and the actual occurrence of incidents really raises the concern. Over 40% of our respondents say that they are more concerned now than they were a year ago. And this statistic, with similar magnitude, is third year in a row now, meaning that every year we question it, roughly half of the respondents say that they are more worried than the year before. And clearly, worry is not decreasing. Only 2% of the respondents say that they are less worried. So this is clear that there is a real fear at many companies on cyber threats. If you look at it from a budget point of view, we see that companies are keeping their cyber budgets or increasing them. We see hardly any companies or organizations claiming they will reduce the budget, which would be the gray and green colors here, which is 2 to 5% of the companies that claim this. We also see that the strong increase in budgets that we've seen over the past years, where indeed a lot of companies said, last year it was 20% of organizations said that their budgets will rise with more than 20%. That's a bit less now. And we see that budgets are kept, increased slightly, with about 1 in 3 saying their budgets will increase. But the magnitude of the increase is less. When we asked our respondents a bit of an open question on priorities of their cyber programs, the answers are quite varied, obviously, and we grouped them into 4 overall priorities. The first one is on preventing cyber threats, preventing cyber incidents. And we see clearly coming back over and over again that organizations are employing a zero trust mindset, in which they are looking at the data, safeguarding identities, and therefore investing time and effort into protecting their digital identities, protecting the data that's at the core of their business. Second priority that came back was here grouped in governance, risk, and compliance. Like companies are strengthening their governance frameworks, they manage the risks more maturely, and obviously driven by some regulatory frameworks, they ensure compliancy with those requirements. A third priority that came back is the overall awareness in organizations, all the way from the field to the board on cybersecurity, through training, through exercises. And it really focuses on the importance of a security conscious culture and the human role in preventing incidents. And the last priority that we distilled from this open question was related to detection and response. Companies are increasing their capabilities to identify and respond to cyber threats. Let me recap the main conclusions of the report for you. We see that companies have a greater awareness on cybersecurity. They recognize and confirm cyber threats, and more than 40% is also very worried on the ongoing threats. They struggle finding the right staff for their cybersecurity teams, and budgets are available and more often than not increasing in value. And for me, a last conclusion is that, especially in the SME segment, the awareness on NIS2 is still low, and companies struggle to understand whether NIS2 applies to them. And when we talk to customers, it is typically the case when it's not only about their direct NIS2 compliance, but also indirectly through their customers or suppliers who demand it for them. The full survey results are available online, and the QR codes on the screen will direct you to the report in your preferred language. We have English, Dutch, and French available, and the main conclusions are available on the webpage, and a full report in even more detail. It's a downloadable PDF version, which in even more detail goes through some of the statistics that I've shown here today. Feel free to go scan the QR code and download the report.
Proximus next. Think possible.